All digital art comes from a combination of layers. We've already worked with layers in previous videos. I just never got into it with any depth. To try to understand layers, think back to your school days. Now you young whippersnappers need to bear with me. Your teacher probably used a piece of equipment called an overhead projector. This was before the smartboard. Transparencies were then put on the glass of this projector. I myself had a folder of transparencies from my anatomy and physiology class that I could lay on the glass of the projector to show the students the anatomy of the human body. You could pick them up and put them down to add and subtract body parts to form the effect you wanted. In essence, you had a layering effect. This is how layers in Affinity Photo 2 work. Each layer is independent of the other and are stacked on top of each other to produce a desired effect. You can edit each layer without affecting the other layers. As you probably know by now, the layers will appear over here in the Layers panel. Of course, right now we don't have an image open, but we will in a minute. You can also take this panel and pull it out if you want to stick it anywhere else on your surface. I'm just going to put it back in and let it sit there because I really haven't decided how I'm going to organize my workspace yet. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to open an image. So we will open, and I want this Halloween image with pumpkins since it's almost Halloween. And here we've got our image open, and we have one layer, and that layer is called background unless you elect to change the name. If you get to where you have a lot of layers, it's probably a good idea to name each one of them to keep it all straight. Now this particular layer right here is a pixel layer, and you know that because right here this tiny little box that I'm pointing at says pixel, and that's how it's going to tell you that it's a pixel layer. When an image is open like this, the program automatically identifies the image as a pixel layer. So the program knows it's dealing with a collection of pixels in this image that can be manipulated in the editing process. That editing process, when you move pixels around with erase tools and whatever tools you're using, is called destructive editing. Now, there's another way that you can bring an image into here too, and that's called place. So if we go up here and say File, and we go down here and say Place, then let me see if I can find my image. Here's my skeleton, and we can open it, and then you see this arrow with this tiny little oval. So we click down and we can draw the image in and then move it around to where we want it. I won't be too picky about how I'm moving it around because the point is really not the editing part, it's just to show you what layers are. Okay, now we have, well, let me lay him down a little bit. Okay, I said I wasn't going to be picky, so much for that. Now we have two layers. We've got the background layer, which is a pixel layer, but this skeleton, when we brought it in, is not a pixel layer. It's called an image layer, and when you mouse over it, you'll see the word image pops up. That's not because it's a PNG image. It is brought in as an image layer when you use that place option. Okay, so now we've got two layers. We've got our pixel layer and we've got our image layer. All right, now what's the difference between these two layers? Well, on this layer, if you try to do anything like paint on it, it's either not going to let you do anything, or if you have what's called our assistant enabled, it will change it to where you can do something. So, for example, if we go over here and let's pick the paintbrush tool, and We'll make sure we have our skeleton selected, and we're going to try to paint on it. Okay, now when we paint on it, see this little assistant that pops up? It says the assistant has rasterized the layer you previously had selected because it was not a raster layer. In other words, it wasn't a pixel layer. So the image has rasterized it or converted to a pixel layer for us. If it hadn't done that, then we wouldn't have been able to paint on it. Okay, let's undo this so we can, before I go on, take a look at it now. Now it says it's a pixel layer because our assistant has rasterized it and converted it into a pixel layer. Okay, so now we're going to undo this so we can not only get rid of that, but we can have our image layer back. And see, our image layer's back. All I did was I went back a couple of steps. Now, if you don't want the assistant to butt into your life, see this little icon up here? It's the assistant settings. So you can click on it, and over here you can uncheck Enable Assistant and then close the window. Now, if you try to paint on the photo again, let's make sure we've got the right one selected, and we do, and we have our paintbrush tool selected. If you try to paint on this again, see, it's not going to do anything, and I have my mouse clicked down, I swear. I'm not trying to pull anything over on you. So, has it stopped working? No, because when we select the pixel layer, like this one, the brush tool is going to work. See? But when we select the image layer and try to paint over it, the brush tool will not work. In order to get it to work again, you're going to have to either rasterize this layer, or you're going to have to create a pixel layer on top of that image layer. Now, if you just wanted to rasterize it, what you would do is you would right-click on it, and right here it says rasterize, and if we clicked on it, it would convert that into a pixel layer. But we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to create another layer. Okay, so right over here, see where it says Add Pixel Layer? We're just going to add another pixel layer. So we still have our image layer, and we have this layer that says Pixel. And so if we wanted to do something to our skeleton, okay, let's select the skeleton. Notice that the painting isn't going to work. But if we select the pixel layer on top of it, we can paint over it. Now, did we really paint on the skeleton layer? No, because if we uncheck our overlay, our transparency on our overhead projector, so to speak, then that will be gone. But it's still on this particular layer. So if you don't want to rasterize something that you brought in as an image layer, then the way you can edit it non-destructively is just by creating a pixel layer to cover it up. And remember, the layer on the top, we now have 3 layers. The one on the top is going to cover up the one on the bottom, and so on. So right here, see how we can uncheck the skeleton? And now we can uncheck the background and check it back, and so on. So we can see what's underneath, just like my transparency examples. Okay, now before I forget about it, I think I'll re-enable my assistant up here. I like having an assistant when I'm really not sure what I'm doing, so I'm going to keep that enabled just in case, because I really don't know when I'll be electing to use an image layer or a pixel layer or not. Now let's type in some text. So if we remember, we've done this before, so we choose the artistic text tool, and we can just type in anything. It would be kind of weird not to type in anything besides Halloween. So now we have another layer right here, the Halloween that we just typed in, and notice right here it tells you that it's called art text. So we've got a layer of art text right here, we've got a pixel layer right here, we've got our image layer here, and we've got our background, which is a pixel layer right here. So we have all sorts of layers now. We've got 4 of them. Okay, now there's another type of layer that we've already used, and that's called the adjustment layer. And remember from past videos, in order to do an adjustment layer, you have to click this icon right here, which is called Adjustments, and that will open this menu. We're going to do a black and white adjustment layer, mainly because we've already done that, so it's probably familiar. So if we click on that, you're going to see that you get an adjustment layer. Now this black and white adjustment layer has set itself on the top. What if we don't want all of this to be black and white? All we have to do is to move it down until we get to the place that we want it to be black and white. So there we have our black and white. In the background, see, it's sitting on top of the background, but it's not sitting on top of the skeleton. So the skeleton is not going to be black and white. The only thing the adjustment layer will affect are all those layers that are underneath it. So that's kind of an important thing to remember. If we wanted that to be, if we wanted the skeleton to be in there, then we have to put it on top of the skeleton. It's kind of hard to tell because the skeleton's white anyway. So you put your black and white wherever on top of whatever you want to appear black and white in your image. If you don't want anything black and white, you can just turn it off and then everything comes back to what it was before. Okay, now we have all of our layers and we can move them around. We can, like I already did, we can turn them off and on. So if we turn the background off and on, you'll see the transparency underneath. Let's select the background layer and let's select the eraser tool. Here's the erase brush tool. So let's click on that and see what happens when we use the erase brush tool. When you use the erase brush tool, what it's going to do is to show you what's underneath that layer. So there you go. That's what's underneath that layer. So, and then you have the skeleton right, whoops. So if you don't want that there, then you can do it that way. Okay, so keep in mind if you use the erase brush, it's going to erase whatever's on there. I think we can probably erase our skeleton. Okay, we have to select, if we select our skeleton, we will erase the skeleton, but notice how it's not transparent because what it's showing you is what it's erasing the skeleton off and it's showing you what is underneath. And since I turned my assistant back on, my assistant has rasterized my skeleton so that that eraser tool will actually work on it. If it hadn't done that, and that's one of the reasons why I turned it back on, because I had planned on showing you how when you erase something, it'll show what's underneath. And if I had not turned that assistant back on, I would have had to go back in and rasterize the skeleton. Now see over here? The skeleton is now a pixel layer, but I have used the eraser tool to get rid of it. Okay, so that is my overview of layers in Affinity Photo 2. Remember to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to be notified when my next video drops.